Welcome to another episode of Dad Up, everyone. Thank you guys very much for joining me. As always, I bring on guests each and every week to inspire you, encourage you as parents to really be the best for your kids and be the best for your family. And the individual I have on today is one of those guys. And I've gotten a chance to know him a little bit over the last, I don't know, a few months or so. But he and I have gotten a chance to connect, and I'm really excited to have my good friend Cory Carlson on the show. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Bryan, thank you very much for having me. It's good to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. First time we're meeting kind of virtually face to face, but I'm really excited to kind of dive into the history of you and obviously your book and your family and all that. Just a really genuine dude that's looking to help people out there become not only better parents but better at building their family and being the role model and the leader that they need to be for their families. So, Cory, for my listeners who may not know who you are, let's dive into a little bit of a back history of you, kind of how you grew up, man, and how you got into the things that you're doing, which led you to what you're doing now. And then obviously this is a dad podcast, so I want to know about your family as well.
hmm Well, thanks for having me on, Bryan. I love your message. I love what you're doing and helping dads. I mean, just be intentional, which it becomes a big word in my life. And kind of what got me here is being intentional and really trying to help leaders win at home and win at work. And a little bit because I just saw passivity. Now, I didn't see passivity in my own life. You asked about how I grew up. I was blessed to have just an incredible dad, very, very intentional, and both my parents. But my mom passed away when I was 15
Mm.
from breast cancer, and so I actually got to see my dad like handle how he loved and cared for her and took care of her during her 7-year battle of cancer, how he also was a traveling salesman. But yet some reason, Bryan, I never remember him missing a game. Like, I don't know how he did it. Like, he could travel across the country and do sales. He could take care of my mom who was sick, and I also had a brother and a sister, but yet he was always there. And it's just this intention. So I had a very good role model of what a dad was like. And so I was, very grateful for that. And then, as far as me becoming a dad, I started my career in Kansas City. And then it took me to I eventually get promoted and moved to Denver, Colorado, and then eventually promoted, moved to Cincinnati, where I live now. But when I got to Cincinnati, I was then VP of a $120 million division, and a little bit kind of getting in over my head in the standpoint I was managing people older than me. I leapfrogged my boss. I was now managing him. And so my schedule was just starting to get chaotic, where it kind of felt like the schedule controlled me and I didn't control my schedule. I remember, skipping the gym, skipping my quiet time, having my laptop on my lap at night while the kids were playing on the ground. And I was like, man, I don't want this forever. There's got to be a better way. So I actually talked to my boss, who I really liked, and I said, hey, I enjoy when you and I connect, but it's not enough because we're both traveling. Is there a better way? And then he said, hey, get an executive coach. I've always had one. So I hired an executive coach, and that's what started to change. I found myself just working differently, thinking differently, and it changed my life. And I know that sounds extreme, but one, it changed my life because now it's what I do for a living, but also just changed my life just because I started to just see things differently than just revenue or, what's the profitability for the company. And in that, it allowed me to be more intentional of a father, more intentional of a spouse, and just an overall better leader. And so in my basically corporate climb, I just saw passivity in my other, some of the coworkers where they weren't intentional at home. It was all about work, and saw fractured marriages. And so I was like, man, I don't want this. And so that began me on the journey to basically where I'm at now, where I'm an executive coach and speaker and author. And this is what I get to do for a living, is come alongside leaders and help them win at home and win at work.
Mhm. And how many kids do you have?
3 kids. So I have 3 kids. My oldest, she's my daughter, she's 18, just finished her freshman year in college. And that's a cool, I mean, they all have their cool stories. I'll do the kids first and I'll talk about each one. But 18-year-old just finished her freshman year in college. 15-year-old just finished freshman year in high school. And then I have a 10-year-old boy who just finished 5th grade.
Oh, wow. That's cool. Now, kind of thinking back to when you were part of that corporate world, corporate America world, whatever you want to call it, did you find that I know you were trying to make sure you were being intentional as a dad, but did you find that maybe you were not as intentional as you thought you needed to be? Or were you still that intentional dad? You just were trying to find a way to make both work as far as work and your home life. Maybe your wife, maybe she mentioned it to you, or maybe your kids were saying something to you. Was there something that kind of clicked for you with your family?
Man, I think I was an okay dad for a long time. I mean, I wasn't amazing for sure, or as intentional as I have been, I'd say in the last decade. And the decade being 10 years ago is when I hired my executive coach. And that's when I noticed a light bulb really switched. But I mean, I don't think I was completely passive, say the first 8 years of my oldest's life. But, I think what I was doing is really what a lot of people are doing. I kind of thought I had this lie that you can't be successful in work and at home. Like it's one or the other. You got to
Right.
pick. Like if you want to be successful at home, that means you got to say no to all the promotions. You got to say no to networking and happy hours, and so you have to say no. Or on the flip side, if you want to be successful in corporate and climb the ladder, you have to say no to family activities
Mhm.
and no to throwing the football around with your kid. Or I just kind of saw that, and some of that pressure, well, one is real in the standpoint that maybe that's all your coworkers. Your coworkers are doing one or the other. And I didn't, other than, I mentioned my dad, but other than that, I didn't have a ton of great role models like right nearby that I could watch and learn from of balancing work and home. So that was kind of a tension as I didn't have, hey, what does this look like? And so when I started to I got my coach and started paying more attention to it. Where the light bulb was for me, Bryan, in some of that is that you can, in fact, win at home and win at work. It takes intentionality, it takes planning, it takes being strategic. But we do all that all the time for work. It's just how
Mhm.
do we also do that at home? And so at home, being intentional and strategic means, am I going on at least 2 dates a month with my wife? Am I finding one-on-one time with my kids throughout the month? I want to do overnight trips with each of my kids where it's just me and them, where we can completely bond. I alluded to this earlier when I said, "Oh, my daughter, my 18-year-old daughter." That's a cool story. What I was getting to on that, because I was texting her this morning, so it was really top of mind. Is I wanted to do a mission trip with each of my kids,
Oh,
and
cool.
in 2019, I went to Nicaragua with my oldest daughter, and it was awesome. It was so cool. And when we were there in 2019, she was like, there was about 8 college interns that were working there. So she was 15 at the time. And she's like, man, I want to do that. I think I want to do what they're doing. And fast forward to right now, she is like, she's there in Nicaragua right now for 6
Wow.
weeks as a intern helping, with the people that travel there to do their mission trips. And it's awesome. It's incredible. And so that was the part I was alluding to earlier with the cool story. But it just takes intentionality. Bryan, I posted something on social media that is done pretty well. Nothing I've ever had has ever gone viral, but it's done pretty well. Where I was preparing for a keynote one time, and as I was thinking, I was like, I've had 18 bosses in my career, but one family.
Mhm.
But yet, how many times I've made choices for those bosses who I may not even know if they're alive anymore. I don't even know where they live in this country. But yet I made choices that put them above my family. And so it's just kind of
Mhm.
this, like those kind of perspective changes. That's what I've been having. Like I didn't have a pivotal moment in my parenting that I was like, oh man, I was bad dad yesterday and I'm a good dad today. It more was just this gradual perspective changes. Hey, you can in fact win at work and win at home.
Yeah. It's funny that you talk about that because that's kind of why I started my podcast. I was a very intentional dad growing up. When I grew up, my parents they were blue collar workers. Hardly came to anything that I did. I played sports in high school,
Mm,
all that kind of stuff, and they didn't come to much because not because they didn't want to, but because they couldn't. They had to work. And I found myself, in the evening times cooking dinner for my sister because my parents weren't home to cook. They were working. And I knew at a fairly young age that I didn't want to live that life as, a potential father when I became a dad myself. I just didn't want to live that life. I wanted to be intentional with my kids. And I don't know why I felt that way at such a young age. It was just the kind of, I missed having my parents around. I missed the opportunities of my parents seeing me uh, develop and be successful in the things that I was doing. I was riding to practices with my friends' parents because I didn't have a ride, those kinds of things. And then, looking in the stands or on the side of the field, I played soccer, baseball, and swimming, wrestling. I did all those kinds of things, but not seeing my family there. And that hit me. It was something that I really needed. And so when my kids came around, I didn't know I was going to coach. I coached all their sports from the ages of 4 all the way up through high school. I didn't know I was going to be a coach for them, but it was my way to be intentional with them. It was my way to be close to them. And I knew that I had to be able to do those things, but also be a provider for my family financially, right? I had to be able to afford putting food on the table and the roof over the head, all those kinds of things. And I was successful at both of those. And so when fast forward, when my kids were older, my older son's out of college now, working in sales. My younger son is about to be in his senior year of college. But fast forward, I was like, hey, now kind of this dad role is kind of over. Now I'm kind of like this guidance person, like this guide for them, this advice person for them. What can I do to help people? And the first thing that come to mind was just what you talked about. Teaching dads that, hey, you don't have to carry the burden of feeling like you have to be the financial provider for the family. So that means you got to work these 80-hour weeks and miss these important events because you're working so hard to make your career life a success, but missing all these opportunities. You don't have to do that and miss out on it. You can be successful in both. You can still be a successful person in business, whether you're an entrepreneur or corporate America. You can still be the successful person in business, but also be a successful father. You can do both because I did it and I've seen other people do it. Now, like you, I've seen many people fail. It's usually they're making their success, their career a priority and missing out on the opportunities. I had a lot of friends that were like that missed out on opportunities with their kids. And I thought if I could do something where I could give back to other dads and kind of help them, guide them through their parenting journey, teaching them how to be successful in their career, but also be a successful dad, I think that's a win. Even if it's just helping one dad, I think that's a win. And that's why I started the podcast. It's a way to kind of encourage other dads. Hey, there's dads out there like Cory that are doing it. There's dads out there that I've had a ton of guests on my show, but just a message of getting out to parents, not just dads, but parents in general, right? I mean, I have 60% of my 60% of my followers are dads, and then 40% are moms. So I'm almost a split, which is cool. But hey, we're on this parenting journey for forever, but really the first 18 years of your kids' lives. And that's really the pivotal parts of your kids' lives that are important to watch them grow and develop and learn about being how it is to survive in this world. And we need to make sure we're intentional about it. And so that's why the podcast got started, is just kind of what you just talked about, hey, you can be successful in your career, but you can also be a successful father or a successful parent. You just need to make some adjustments. That's it. Is there equal balance? I don't necessarily believe in the equal balance. There's always going to be this give and take on both sides, but learning to navigate through that and finding those, kind of that, I guess, that balance or that equal time. It's just a matter of just making some adjustments. How you feel the same way?
I do feel the same way. I actually don't even like the word work-life balance, just because to that, it's like, it's never balanced.
Right.
And I remember so my first book's called Win at Home First, and the subtitle's An Inspirational Guide to Work-Life Balance. And when I talked with the consultant to help me with publishing, I was like, I don't want work-life balance. I want something different. And she was so kind, but it basically just said, listen, unless you're a huge name like Jeff Bezos or somebody else, you can't come making up words. Like it can't be like work-life rhythm or harmony or anything like that. For SEO, it's got to be work-life balance. I was like, okay, well, there it is. It'll be balance. You mentioned, the idea of provision, and I've kind of I've had two careers, which I'm very grateful for. The first one was a corporate career, so I understand that pressure and what that's like, and I reported up to private equity, and I had all those cool, amazing experiences, and know kind of what that pressure provision is like. I also, for the last few years, have been on this entrepreneurial journey where I left corporate, started coaching from scratch, and thanks to God's provision, able to now have a full-time job coaching and speaking, and have coaches on my team. And it's just, it's cool. It's amazing. It's got to happen. But about 2020, man, I had this phrase that just hit me, and maybe it'll help some listeners, is as I was, working, I'm trying to figure out, hey, how am I an intentional dad? How am I an intentional spouse? But wait, I'm trying to grow a coaching business. I need to be on LinkedIn all the time. I need to be on social media all the time. And there, try to get more clients, more speaking engagements. And like this, just this hustle. I just had this horrible feel of hustle, and faith is a big part of my journey. In this particular Bible verse, Psalm 127, 1 and 2 is basically, those who, basically build the tower labor in vain. Those that, sit over the watchtower basically watch over in vain. And just this whole idea when I was with that verse is, it just hit this phrase of God has the night shift. Like that was the phrase that just it stood out to me. I know God has all the shifts, right? Day shift, but for me it was like night shift. And what that phrase meant to me is, if I bust my tail during the day, call it 8 to 5, then I can have faith and trust that God's got the night shift. Like I can relax. I can sleep well. I can play with my kids. I could go on a date with my, spouse. I could hang out with my buddies. I could go to the gym, kind of like all these different things. And I got a big peace of mind to think, hey, the provision's not all on me. If I control the input, the God's going to control the impact. So if I could do it, steward well, I got to take care of my lead and lag indicators and watch what my KPIs, my key performance indicators are for my business. But if I'm doing that, then, hey, I'm just going to have faith that God's got the night shift, that while I'm playing or doing whatever with the kids, there's someone who's reading my post on LinkedIn and wants to reach out and engage. There's someone who's sending me an email about hiring me for a speaking engagement. Like there's something happen. I think that's true for all listeners, is if we just, have this faith that if we put in the work, whatever those hours are, man, the rest of the time, we don't have to be staring at our phones all the time thinking we're getting one, if we don't get this one email and respond within 30 seconds, we're going to lose the prospect. Or constantly just looking at our social media feed to make sure we didn't miss out on something. And I think that's a big thing in order for us to not only, dad up, and you mentioned you're split 60-40 women, and even mom up. In order to do that, there has to be this peace of mind that we have that, hey, we don't have to work all the time. And we aren't put on this earth just to work. Yes, we are supposed to work, but it's also go be parents, go be spouses, go be friends, go be light to others. So anyways, that phrase, God has a night shift, has been a game changer for me over these last 3 years.
Yeah, that's interesting. God has a night shift because it gives us an opportunity to kind of, like you said, just take a back seat to the stuff that we have, the stuff that we're grinding at, and really be intentional, not only with our own selves, meaning our self-care, but also be intentional with our families, our spouse, and our kids. This idea of win at home first is powerful because I'm a big believer in the family structure is really the foundation of your life. If you've got a spouse and kids, if that structure, if that family culture or structure is solid, meaning there's no cracks in it, everything else is going to grow around it, meaning you're going to have success in other areas of your life if your family structure is intact. And I think that if there are cracks in the foundation, it makes that family structure weak and it'll impact other things outside the home. I'm a big believer in, you know, dads that they think that they have to build these successful careers or these successful business outside of the home, and they're missing all these things inside the home. I'm a big believer in that your legacy starts within your home, not outside your home. And the legacy you're building starts within, meaning the family structure, and that family structure has to be solid. For you, Cory, you saw that. You saw that you needed to make sure that your family structure, the foundation of your family, is solid before you could really take this venture in whatever it is outside the home that you were doing. How did that play into kind of I guess, the relationship with your wife and your kids? Did they sense that? Did they notice that? How did that kind of form or happen for you?
Um, uh, One thing you mentioned legacy, and I think it's so important for us to, as we build legacy is built on our presence with our kids, not our provision.
Right.
You know, I mean, our kids would much rather hang out with us, have memories, and go on adventures with us, have conversations, than they want the new shoes or the new backpack or the new iPhone, whatever that thing is. And so many parents are out there hustling. It's like, hey, if I just go buy them this, and that's what they want. No, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to go play with us. They want to talk with us. They want to have a coffee with us or a beer with us, depending on their age. I mean, that's what they want. And so it's presence over provision as we build legacy. And that is just so critical. Yeah, Bryan, for me on kind of that story, went home first, I had an incredible role model. I mean, my dad, it was amazing. But in my 20s, I lost my way, as many people can, where it just became, I started taking my identity to work. Where if I can get this promotion, then I'm the man. And if I, can get these different accolades or make this amount of money, then I'm the man. I kind of lost my way a little bit. And so in that process, we can never take our identity something temporary. And I was taking it to my job, and, that doesn't always satisfy. I mean, it may satisfy in the moment, but not from an identity standpoint. And so for me, I lost at home first, which is why I wrote the book, Went Home First. And so in the process of taking my identity to work and that not being fulfilling, I then took my identity of who I am as a man to my wife, which also doesn't work because another human being who's also broken and has sin can't necessarily fill the void of another human being who's broken. So I didn't know all this at the time. And so when that didn't work out, or I wasn't getting my value, my worth from her, then I was like, hey, I'm going to go, and then I, did something stupid and ended up having an affair, which is awful and don't recommend that for anyone. But in that whole process, and I came clean of it a handful of years later, and that began my journey of really just becoming a better man, a better father. And this summer, my wife and I will celebrate 24 years of marriage. So it's a cool story with a happy ending. And, so very, very grateful for that. But in that process, because I lost at home first, I don't want to see another leader lose at home first, because then you can make changes. And so really for any listener, like no matter where you're at right now, if the marriage is stale, your parenting stale, you don't have work with a purpose, you don't have to stay there.
Mm-hmm.
You can totally be intentional and recalibrate and kind of course correct. And so that's really been kind of what my, kind of my mission was. And as you mentioned, Bryan, if there's cracks in the foundation at home, it's going to come into work.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would get hired by coaching clients before I wrote the book, and just to help them with vision and values for the company, to help build culture. And I still remember this one leader. He's a leader of a company, about 200 folks, and hired me to work on culture, work on all these different pieces of his business. And in one of our early calls, I was like, hey, I'm going to help you with all this stuff, right? So he hired me. But hey, tell me about the weekend. Like, what'd you do this weekend? And he mentioned the weekend, and it had to do with his kids, but there's really no mention of a spouse. And I was a little suspicious and kind of got that, prompting to ask further questions. And so I I asked another question like, hey, where was your wife? Like, why didn't she join you? And then the energy just kind of went out of his voice. He was all excited telling me about the growth, how they just crossed 200 employees, how they are launching a new kind of product within their division. But when I talked about family, it just got sucked out, all the energy. So at the time, that was my largest contract to date. But I just was like, I got to ask this question and I may get fired. And so I just said, hey, listen, if we're going to have success, working on the vision, values for the company and building culture, we got to make sure home's right. And so do you mind if we talk about home and work while we, work together? And he got long pause. And I was like, oh man, I just got fired for my biggest contract ever. And he said, yeah, that's all right. We can do that. Because every day I drive home, I get a pit in my stomach. Mm-hmm. And so I think for a lot of leaders, and you may not get the pit in the stomach, but we have that, if we get in a fight with our spouse at 7 a.m., it's going to impact us at our 9 a.m. meeting. Whether we're thinking about it or we just get a text that's still continuing the fight, it's a nasty text, and we're supposed to be on our A game during the meeting, but yet we're getting text from a fight in the morning. Or come towards the end of the day, 3, 4 o'clock, as you start to think about going home and your re-entry back to the house, you start to think, oh man, when I walk in the house, I'm going to say this to them. And then they're going to say this, and therefore I'll say that. And you end up kind of, preparing for the re-entry of somewhat argument. And so that's why I think it's so critical to what you were saying, Bryan, is we have to win at home first in order to be successful in all areas of our life. Because otherwise it just takes us off really our A game.
Yeah, that's a good example. I mean, if your home is chaotic in the morning, which when you have younger kids, most homes are, right? Chaotic, trying to get everybody ready, trying to get everybody out the door. But if you're not intentional or working on that, it can impact your day. And the same is true at the end of the day. If you have a meeting that went sideways in the afternoon, or you just had a rough day overall, when you come home, even though you're now dad or husband or both, you're still thinking about work. You still have the stuff that, oh man, I didn't get this done today. I've got to do this tomorrow. And now you've carried that load into your family. And some of the dads that I coach, I tell them, I just had one of my clients, he was telling me, he's like, one of the biggest struggles I face right now is he's an entrepreneur running a business. And he says, I'm coming home and still trying to focus on my business, or still have things I have to take care of in my business, but I'm trying to be intentional with my family. And I said, I know it's tough, but you absolutely have to separate the two. You can't have this commingling of both. It's not going to work. And what I recommended to him is that what I recommend to all the dads that I coach, but I said, when you're coming home and you know that you want to be an intentional father and an intentional husband, when you're coming home, you need to find a way to disconnect work. So I encourage them. I don't know if it's maybe, this is what I used to do. When I was coming home from the office, I used to, if I had a bad day or knew I just wasn't in the right mindset to walk in the front door, I used to go for an extra drive, 10 minutes or so. And I used to listen to music that I liked, kind of get my mind kind of away from business and just kind of help me to just become more positive, more energetic. And so I encourage my dads, listen, take an extra drive, maybe listen to some good music that you like, that it kind of gets you upbeat and in the spirit of being ready to be an all-in dad. Because if your gas tank is almost on empty when you come in the door, how in the world are you going to be intentional? You're just not. And so in order to fill that cup back up, fill that gas tank back up, you got to find ways. And I don't know if it's an extra drive. I don't know if it's sometimes sitting in the driveway and maybe taking 5 to 10 minutes to just meditate, just to get yourself recalibrated so you can walk in the door and be 100% all in as a dad. And it's so important. Yes, you can focus on your business. You can focus on your career. You can have the success out there. But when you come at home, they don't want the business. They don't want the career. They want you. And the only way that you can give everything you got to them is if you're dialed in, you're intentional with it. And you have to learn to separate the two. And I think that's what's so crucial about, your book, When at Home First. That's right there. That's what I'm talking about is that whole mindset shift of, hey, my family's got to come first. For me, I worked in corporate America, and it was important to me to be a coach for my kids. That was important to me. I also had a very successful career, but when it came time for my boys, when they wanted to play sports, so when it came time for me to coach them, I went to my boss and I said, hey, I want to be intentional with my kids. I had a sit down conversation with my supervisor and said, hey, I want to be intentional with my kids. I'm going to give you 100% of my time when I'm here, but when my kids need me, I want to be 100% with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to find a way to make this work. I had always had supervisors like you. I've had a ton, right? But I've always had supervisors that said, you do you. As long as your work's getting done, I don't care what you do. You do you. Okay, great. But I can guarantee you, Cory, had I had one supervisor that said, that ain't going to work for us. We need you, even if you're at home and we need to email, I need to send you a text, or I need to send you an email, or I need you to take care of something. I need you here. I would have said, I quit. I would have walked away. I would have found a different career, because that's how important my family was to me. I didn't care about what it was going to cost me on the outside, because I knew that those were my ride or dies. My kids and my wife were my ride or dies. So I had to be there for them. And luckily, fortunately for me, I was able to find that career that allowed me to do both.
Yep.
There were many a times, Cory, that I tell this story often, but there were many times that, I had to coach a game at 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which meant I had to leave the office. So I would get to the office. I would sacrifice my mornings. I would get to the office at 4 a.m. so I could make sure that I gave my time to my company, but also I could leave at 2 o'clock and not feel any guilt or not have anybody give me any pressure. So there were certain sacrifices I had to make. Yes. And for me, it was just getting to the office a little bit early. I didn't do that every day, but it was some days when we had games or something, we had stuff going on, I made sure I did that. I didn't miss, I can count on one hand how many times I've actually missed something that I needed to be at, whether it's a school function, a parent teacher conference, open house, things like that. But a lot of that's not true for a lot of parents. There's only a few things that parents can say that they were at for their kids. For me, it was just the opposite. And I just made those sacrifices. That was that important to me.
Yeah, no, it's good. I think for me, you made the comment that you always would have chose family over work. I mean, I think if I'm honest, probably in my 20s, I wouldn't have done that. I thought the only way was, no, you got to grind it out. Now's the time. Down the road, you can make different adjustments.
Mm-hmm.
I was naive and kind of blinded by I call it the pressure that corporate puts on all of us. So I don't know how I would have done. I probably, I made some okay choices. I made some poor choices as well. But I'd say in the last decade, maybe last 15 years, but for sure last decade, I would walk. Like I for sure would walk if someone, kind of got in the way. So I think just for the listener, it's if you're kind of feeling there is no other way, odds are if you're listening to this podcast, dad up, then that there could be a different way. But I think just keep pushing one step at a time of just getting better and more intentional. I mean, it is a process. Bryan, I love how you're coaching and informing your clients about the drive home.
Mm-hmm.
And I do the same thing. I think a couple other things I learned in my own journey, but also just sharing with clients is not only it may be a 5-minute meditation in the driveway or an extra lap, but there's a few things I just don't do in the last 15 minutes of a drive. Like I used to, but I don't listen to podcasts,
Mm-hmm.
political radio stations,
Mm-hmm.
sports, because it can mess with I can walk inside, and I used to, walk inside, be upset that the team's not making the trade, or the team did make the trade, or I, can't believe, this political statement said this, or that, or even podcasts, my mind can get rolling.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing is phone calls. Is I don't do phone calls on the drive home when I start getting close to the house. For a couple of reasons. One, too many times in the conversation in my driveway when a kid ran up and said, Dad, I'm like, I can't, I'm on the phone. and you see their heart break. It's like, that's awful. And I don't want to do that anymore. And then the other thing is I would be on a phone call and I'd like pull in the driveway, get off the phone, and I'd walk in two different energy levels. Either one, super excited because I just got the sales agreement or something good happened. And I'd walk in and I'd be like, oh, babe, I got the new contract or whatever the deal is. And my wife is probably not that excited because she's been changing diapers or she's been doing other things. And it's like, okay, great. Would you please walk the dog or something like that? So I noticed we were different energy levels. Or if I had the other end of the extreme where it didn't go very well, my career was always in civil engineering and construction. And so a project may have gone bad or a contractor is not pleased with us. And so I could walk in frustrated. So the day I walk in frustrated, she may be in a good mood. I mean, so I just found myself, if I can re-enter into the house at kind of a, call it medium level, then it's much better. And then the other phrase I share, Bryan, is, our day ends when our head hits the pillow, not when we walk through the front door.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big perspective change for many people because they think they walk through the front door. It's like, oh, I'm home. Let me sit on the couch. Let me catch a breather. No, figure out how to rally. You figured out how to rally for your 2:00 meeting that you're tired for. You either got coffee or you walked around the building or you did some stretches or whatever you did to have energy for the 2:00 meeting. You got to figure out how to have energy for the last 4 or 5 hours of your day before you go to bed.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's a big shift for people to think about is, hey, the day's not over right when you walk in. And
Right.
so how can you show up and be a servant leader and serving your spouse and serving your kids?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up about the ride home, because that is exactly what I tell my clients. Listen, I don't want you listening to podcasts. I don't want you listening to talk radio. I want you listening to music, or you can listen to silence. You can have nothing on and allow you to just kind of decompress while you're driving home. But music was the first thing that I always did. It got me, good music that I like to listen to. It just got me in the right mood, it had the right energy, banging out to some music, to some good music. And that's what I encourage my clients. Listen, put on your favorite music, man. Just start kind of decompress and get in the energy get the energy up for when you walk in that door. And you're absolutely right. I mean, it's one of those things where, listen, I have the office phone and I have my personal cell phone. My office phone doesn't come out as soon as I walk out the door, it's put away and I don't look at it again. I don't look at it again. And so if something urgent comes up, like my boss has to tell me something urgent, he will always text my personal phone because he knows I don't look at my work phone. I just do not look at it because that's my time. That's my time. And I'm not going to allow that to be stolen from me. So it's so important for us to learn how to, not really find that balance, but learn how to put that right schedule in place. And a lot of it comes down to scheduling. I teach a lot of my dads, listen, you have the meetings on your schedule. You have maybe you gym time on your schedule. You have your doctor's appointments on your schedule. Why isn't your family time on your schedule? Do you have a date night scheduled this week or next week? No. Why? Mm-hmm. Is your wife not important to you? Well, no. Yeah, I want to go on a date. Okay. Well, you need to put it on your schedule. Is the time with your kids on your schedule? No. Okay. Why? That should be the first thing that should go on your schedule. Your wife and your kids, and then everything else follows. And my wife and I have a routine every single Sunday. We chat about our week. What do you have going on this week? What do I have going on this week? To make sure that we put the time in as a family, to make sure that we're being intentional with our time, our personal time. My boys are grown and older now. So we do activities together as a family, but my intention right now is my wife, and we have routines that we go through every single day. And one of those is our reading. We read together. We have a marriage book that we read out of. She has a copy, I have a copy. We each read a chapter in that book, and it usually takes us about 20 minutes or so. And then we sit and talk about it for the next 20 minutes. And we're sitting at the dining room table, TV's off, nothing's on, we're just the two of us. And it allows us to be intentional with each other. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, as a couple, we have a marriage coach. We're talking about executive coaches, right? We have a licensed therapist. She's a licensed marriage therapist, but she's our coach. And we see her every other month. And we don't do that because we have problems. We do that so we don't have problems.
That's
A
right.
lot of people take their cars to the mechanic when there's something wrong, or go to the doctor when they're not feeling right. But do you do anything with yourself or with your car when everything's working fine? Most of the time, no. So with our marriage, there's nothing wrong in our marriage, but we still make time for each other in doing these extra things to make sure that it's running smoothly, right? That we're staying on top of things. The same has to be true with our kids. And I know I'm talking to Cory, but I'm really talking to the listeners out there. The same has to be true with our kids. We have to make sure that our bond and our relationship with our kids is important and priority. We have to make it a priority, period. And if you're not doing that, that's okay, but let's make the shift. Let's make the adjustment if that's what you want. If you don't want to do that, if you want to make a career your priority, then turn the podcast off, because this isn't for you. But for the parents out there that want to make their family a priority, listen to what Cory's saying, listen to what I'm saying. There's time. Doesn't matter how old your kids are. There's time to make those adjustments, and you have to start today. So I'll get off my soapbox. Well, I mean, that's awesome. I want to talk about the book. I do have the book. Thank you for sending it to me. It's an awesome book. I started skimming through it last night because I got it yesterday. But one of the things that I want to talk about in your book is just this, and I want you guys to go get the book. So I'm not gonna give a whole bunch of it away, but just the structure of the book. And the reason I say that, because it follows a specific line. And I don't know if Cory will probably say, yes, I did this intentionally, and I think he did, but it follows the structure of the first section of the book is all about you and how you manage you. I talk a lot on my podcast about self-care. If you're not taking care of yourself and you're not 100% yourself, as far as your fitness, your nutrition, making sure your mind is right, spiritually, whatever those things are, if that's not in order first, you can't be 100% for your business, and you can't be 100% for your family. So the first part of this book is all about you. Then he goes into marriage. Why is that important second? Well, I think that as we talked about, the structure, right? The structure. If your marriage isn't right, more than likely your business isn't going to be right, because you're going to be so headstrong and frustrated with how your marriage is. And if your marriage isn't right, your kids aren't going to be right, because they're seeing everything that you guys are doing as a couple.
That's right.
So if your marriage is not in working order, good working order, there's no way you can be 100% in all these other areas. So I love that. Talks about you, then at marriage. Then where do you think he goes? Cory goes to parenting. Of course, that's the next important thing. Your marriage is good. You're good. Now we got to focus on parenting, how we're going to make that right. And then the last thing, the last part that he talks about in the book is your work. And I love that. I love the structure of I love the structure of the book. Kind of, that's my whole point, is that it's absolutely ideal, perfect, lines up right. It's what I believe in. And for you listening to this show, it's probably what you believe in too. So was that the ideal behind the structure of the book?
Yeah, that was. And thanks for promoting the book. I appreciate that. I mean, the book, for listeners, it's available on Amazon or in paperback and Kindle ebook. It's also on Audible, and you get to hear more of my voice because I narrated it, which is
cool.
Which is super fun, and I get a little teary-eyed at the end. So that was a cool story when I thanked my wife. After I was done, I was getting teared up. The sound engineer was like, "Hey, do you want to retake that?" I was like, "No, let's just keep it the way it is." And he goes, "Good, good." But as I shared my story earlier on this podcast, when I started giving my thanks to my spouse, it kind of got emotional knowing what we've been through, both a low spot, but tons and tons of good spots, because of just recalibrating and being more intentional. So that was grateful for that. And also, I'd love to, Bryan, as a thank you to you and just a gift to your listeners, if they want to get a free book, they just pay shipping and handling. The website address is corymcarlson.com/free book. And you can pick either book, Win Home First, or my second book, which is called Rise and Go. and you just pay shipping and handling, and our team will get it to you.
Oh,
But as
that's
far as
awesome.
the
Thank you
structure
for
of the
that.
book, that's exactly right. I mean, I did it in that flow because that's what I believe to be true. And it, starts with ourselves. We all know the airplane where you got to give yourself oxygen before you can give it to anybody else.
Mhm.
Same thing. And you nailed all the other reasons of why I did it, where, when we have a strong marriage, our kids see that. They leave
Mhm.
the home with confidence and security, knowing that their parents love each other. And I think that's the other reason why dating and pursuing your spouse is so important, because the parents see, I mean, the kids see the parents love each other, and that's good. We're not only are we modeling what marriage looks like when we have a good marriage in our homes, but we're also, the kids have that confidence, that security. Just a couple of weeks ago, Holly and I went and did a staycation, where we didn't necessarily have time to go anywhere for a crazy long week vacation. We got a lot of fun things coming on this summer, but it's like, hey, we need some time just to go hang out. And so we did, and we went downtown Cincinnati, and it was awesome. And we try to do that in addition to, our different dinner dates throughout the, the month that we do. And then obviously it's parenting is that third one you mentioned. And in the parenting section, I mean, I talk about ways to invite them into relationship, like hanging out with them, having fun, but it's also challenge and responsibility, where, it's make your bed and get good grades and those type of things, but it's both and so I kind of talk about with parenting that there could be a miss, right? There could
Mhm.
be the dad or mom that's all challenge, and they're dictators, and their kids are like little soldiers. Like, yeah, they may do it, but they're going to rebel later at some point. Or the other extreme is if you're all about inviting them into a relationship and saying yes to everything, you can create spoiled little brats. You
Mhm.
can create an entitled group. But how we want to lead as parents is both inviting relationship and challenge into responsibility. And from a faith perspective, I mean, that's just like, even Jesus says, "Hey, come follow me." Very invitational, but then go and make disciples. I mean, it's truth and grace. And so that we talk about that in the third part, and the last part's on work. And on work, it's a little bit of what we talked about. It's intentional boundaries. It's blocking your schedule. Talk about how work can expand and contract to fill the time. And so, anyways, a lot of it's just into the book are things that I learned the hard way. I don't have it perfect. I'm still screwing up being a dad, a lot. But someone at Forbes magazine says one of 7 books everyone on your team should read. So I encourage you to get it, and others have found it to be a value, and so hopefully you do as well, to the listener.
Yeah, I like that you got the quote on there from John Gordon, who's a really cool dude and somebody that I've had on my show as well. It just the premise of the book, or the purpose behind the book, is not just to help you become a better parent, but it's really to help you live a more fulfilled and better life. And I think that's really yeah, I can't wait to dive in, because I'm really curious on all the stuff that you talk about in there, and just and skimming through it. But I'm just really excited about it. It's something that is needed, and so I'm glad you did it. So thank you for that, and thank you for the gift as well. I appreciate that. We'll make sure we put that in the show notes. Let me ask you one more question though. When it comes to you, Cory, I like to ask dads what that I have on the show about challenges and things that they're facing right now, and maybe things that they're learning from those challenges to help them, be a better parent. What challenges are you facing right now that you're having to learn from or grow through?
A challenge I consistently face, and I'm getting better at it, but it's still a phase. I just gave that kind of description of, high invitation, being the fun dad all the time, or high challenge being the kind of hard charging dad. And where I lean, Bryan, is I'm the high challenge.
Mm.
Um, and it's not that I'm cracking the whip on grades. Quite honestly, I'm blessed. It's pretty. I don't have to worry about that with my kids. They're studying hard. But for me, it's being a coach for a living. I'm sure I've ruined my kids and they've got wounds because their dad was a coach. But I mean, it's almost like, hey, what's your vision? What are your values? What are your goals? Have you read today? Are you reading scripture? I mean, I don't think I'm saying those things all the time, but I think sometimes my presence, maybe the energy I'm bringing, I share things from my day. Like I'll share this podcast with my family tonight at dinner. We'll talk about it. And I think just in the sharing, I'll bring up, hey, kids, you doing this and that type of stuff. And so for me, the challenge I face a lot is I lean towards challenge. So I've got to work on being fun and doing more play with my kids. And yeah, I can do it from time to time for sure. I mean, we already talked, me and the kids this afternoon, we're gonna go play tennis. But my default is to challenge. I gotta consistently lean more to play, having conversations, not wanting to parenting every comment they make, not wanting to give them life advice on everything that they had. If they have a a little squabble with a friend, I can't just be saying, trying to life advice them all the time. So I think, Bryan, that's the biggest challenge I'm facing. I think it's probably pretty fresh as well, just because I probably did all those things already this morning before we even hit record.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I think for me as a dad of two boys that are in their 20s, I'm not really that way with them anymore. Now it's like they come to me if they have issues. We talk about stuff and we talk about their days, we talk about the things that are going on. Those are normal conversations for us. But when they come to me and ask me advice or ask my opinion on something or how to get something done, I give it to them. And they're at the point now, they're in their 20s. So I don't expect them to, take my advice and run with it. I expect them to make their own decision based on what I told them. And so they can take my advice or leave it. I'm okay either way. But yeah, so for me, that's kind of where my challenge is. It's like I still want to be that protector, that dad that just said, all right, this is how you take care of it. You need to make sure you do this, this, this. No, I just give them advice now. I have to learn. That's kind of my challenge. I have to learn to just be the person that's there and supporting them and helping them when they need it. And otherwise, just be the listening ear for them. Sometimes your kids just need you to listen and just zip it and just listen for them. So really good stuff, man. I appreciate you being on. For my listeners, viewers, if they want to learn more about you, best places for them to do that.
Yeah, CoryMCarlson.com is the website where you can connect to blogs I write, podcasts, access to both of my books, Win Home First, Rise and Go. And then I'm active on social media. The one I'm active the most is LinkedIn, just because that's where a lot of my clients hang out as business leaders. So those would be the places, and definitely, yeah, reach out, and if I can help in any way and be a resource to help you on a journey, I love to do that. But yeah,
Awesome.
Bryan, thanks for having me on. And I love your message. I love what you're doing. It's been fun to watch you and see the podcast take off, which it should. It's a good podcast with a great message. So thank you for letting me be a part of it. I appreciate it greatly.
Yeah, I appreciate you being on. I'm glad we got a chance to connect, and kind of looking forward to growing our friendship and watching more of you, not only develop as an executive coach, but also as a father as well. So thank you again for being on, my friend. Listen, guys, this has been another episode of Dad Up. Just want to thank my good friend Cory Carlson for being on. Make sure if you're not getting the Win at Home First, you get the Rise and Go, which you can do that at his website. So make sure you pick that up. I highly recommend it. I haven't read it all the way yet. I've skimmed through it, but I'm really looking forward to it. It's got a awesome structure. So make sure you do that. And what's the name of your podcast again?
It's actually Win a Home First.
Okay. Well, there you
go. I
So,
launched it April 2020. And when I did that, I didn't feel that there was stuff out there talking home, work, and faith. And so that is at least, and so I launched it. So every week we talk to leaders talking about all three of those areas.
Awesome.
So
make sure you check out his podcast, subscribe to it. This is what this show's all about, is learning how to be a husband, a father, maybe a mom, but also a parent that is teaching their kids how to be good people, good human beings, and being intentional with our time. So make sure you check out his podcast, subscribe to it. And as always, if you haven't subscribed yet to my show, please make sure you do that so you don't miss any of the awesome guests I have on it each and every week. And like I always say, I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Dad Up. Wow, another amazing episode in the books. So much was shared, and I'm truly grateful my guest was able to pour into you to help you elevate your dad game and really dad up. Make sure you bang that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. And while you're here, please don't forget to leave me a rating and a review. I always appreciate the feedback. And one last thing, don't forget, your role as a dad is one of the most important roles you have. So if you need a little help or have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me on my website at daduptribe.com or at my Instagram page at Dad Up Podcast. Until next time, everyone, Dad Up.